Hi, welcome to Exploring with Scientists. My name is Alice. I'm a graduate student at Michigan State University, and I study moths and butterflies. So naturally, today in this video, we're going to be talking all about moths and butterflies. Let's get started. Before we take a deep dive into moths and butterflies, do you know the scientific name for moths and butterflies? If you watched a previous video, that's a clue. If you guessed Lepidoptera, then you're right. Scientists refer to moths and butterflies as Lepidoptera. But what are Lepidoptera? What types of animals are they? What larger group of animals do they fit into? Well, Lepidoptera, or moths and butterflies, are insects. Other types of insects are bees, beetles, dragonflies. There are lots of different kinds. And an interesting fact about insects is that they are the most diverse group of animals on the planet. There are more types of insects than there are any other type of animal. All insects have a few things in common. The first is that they have an exoskeleton. What's an exoskeleton? Well, humans, we have our skeleton inside, but insects, they have their skeleton on the outside of their bodies, and that's called an exoskeleton. All insects also have three sections of their body. They have a head, they have a thorax, and they have an abdomen. All insects also have 6 legs. So moths and butterflies are insects, but what makes them different from other types of insects? Well, one of the main things is that moths and butterflies have scales. In this picture in the middle, you can see all the individual scales on this painted lady butterfly's wings. And scales are really cool because they're some of what makes moths and butterflies so beautiful and colorful. A fun fact is that there are over 180,000 species of moths and butterflies in the world, and scientists are constantly discovering new species of moths and butterflies. Compare that to birds. There are only between 9 and 10,000 species of birds, so there are so many different types of moths and butterflies. At this point, you might be wondering, what's the difference between a moth and butterfly? They all have scales, right? They're all insects, but how are they different? Well, there are a few key characteristics that can help you tell the difference between a moth and a butterfly. One is that moths, they're awake at night. Another thing is that they have many different types of antennae. Here are this moth's antennae. Another thing that makes moths different from butterflies is that generally they have very thick and fuzzy bodies. In contrast, butterflies are awake during the day. Almost all butterflies have these club-tipped antennae. So here's the antennae and there's a little club tip. Another thing that makes butterflies different from moths is generally they have pretty thin, not as fuzzy bodies. So moths and butterflies are kind of different, but they all share the same life cycle pretty much. So Lepidoptera, they start as eggs, and then the eggs hatch into caterpillars. And caterpillars generally go through about 5 or 6 stages. These stages are like different growth spurts. After the caterpillar is done growing, it'll form a chrysalis or a cocoon, and then eventually it'll emerge as an adult butterfly or moth. It'll mate with another butterfly or moth and then lay eggs, and the whole process starts all over again. But why are moths and butterflies important? We know there are lots of different types of moths and butterflies, but why should we care? Well, one big reason is that moths and butterflies, they interact with lots of different types of animals. One example is moths and butterflies, a lot of them are pollinators, which means that they visit flowers and drink the nectar and get some pollen on them and transfer it to a different flower. Another reason that moths and butterflies are important is that they're food for a lot of different animals. For example, bats, birds, and even bears eat moths and butterflies. Without moths and butterflies, there'd be a lot less food for these animals. But one thing you might need to know is that Lepidoptera are in trouble, and mainly because of human activities. There are lots of different threats to Lepidoptera, including light pollution, because as you may know, moths are attracted to light, and the lights that humans leave on at night kind of distract the moths. Other things like pesticides, climate change, and habitat destruction are making life harder for moths and butterflies. But luckily, there are some ways that we can help moths and butterflies and make life easier for them. One thing that you and I can do is plant a garden full of native plants, native wildflowers. And these plants would provide food and flowers for the moths and butterflies to visit. Another thing that you can do is turn off your outdoor lights at night, and this reduces light pollution so that the moths aren't confused. So that's all for this video. Thanks for exploring with me. I'll see you in the next video.